Welcome, everybody. We should be live. In today's class, we are going over defense, prophylaxis. Let me know in the chat, how does everything look? How does everything sound? Are we looking good? Jackie is saying by defense, do you mean a great offense? Just kidding. You're not far off though, Jackie. We'll talk about this, but oftentimes the best defense is looking to generate offense. Smithy Q is here. Smithy, I was actually looking, so the games aren't set in stone. I was looking for some examples to match what you were asking in Discord. So thank you for that. Tom Prack, welcome. Tony Bowen, welcome. Okay, if you're in the chat, let me know where you're watching from. We'll just kind of let people roll in here. It's always fun to see where people are tuning in from. I'm from Minnesota, in case you can't tell by the accent. And it's like 10 degrees Fahrenheit here right now. It's so cold. Actually, I'm going to check the temp. Oh, it's nicer today, 24 degrees Fahrenheit. It's been really cold here. Tony is from Denver. Tom Prack is from Germany. Jonah is from Finland. Awesome. Welcome. Germany and Finland. So it must be like late afternoon there, I would guess. Maybe 4 p.m. So today's games, we have 4 games queued up. Oh, 5 p.m. there. We have Reshevsky against Petrosian, Karpov against Kasparov, Geller against Korchnoi. We're going to do one course giveaway. And then we have Kramnik against Kasparov. So it's essentially a bully Gary day. Like we're going to show 2 games where Gary loses. But part of the theme of today is how to play against attacking players. So we're looking to learn how to play defensively here. But part of the theme is if you are going against someone who you just know always plays aggressive, how do you play against them? You can go into that game with a certain strategy and play in a way that sort of gives them the worst chance to create a good attack, right? We want to make those attacking players take extra risks just to be able to attack us, because then we can exploit those things. Okay, it's 6 o'clock in Finland, or 1800, 5 p.m. in Germany. Okay, so let's jump right into game number 1. This is going to be Reshevsky with the white pieces, Petrosian with the black pieces. And let's flip the board. We're going to look at it from Petrosian's point of view. All right, here we go. So we have d4, knight of 6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop to b4. This is called the Nimzo-Indian defense. e3, castle. And we're going to go through some of these moves pretty quickly just to get to the more interesting position where we can talk defense a little bit. Okay. So here we go. White just accepted these doubled pawns. But what does white have in return for the double pawns? So this kind of goes back to, we're going to talk about a lot of concepts from our evaluating the position and middle game strategy classes. Let's look at this position and try to figure out what are the plans for each side. So white just accepted these doubled pawns. This is a pawn weakness for white. But what white has in return is the bishop pair. So 2 bishops for bishop and knight. The plan for white is going to be try to gain space and try to attack and open up the board. So even though we're only 9 moves in and the center looks kind of symmetric, it doesn't seem like a lot's going on, you can actually start to sense here which side needs to go on offense and which side is content maybe just playing a neutral position or even playing defensively. So in this position, it's really white that needs to go on offense. They need to create something to balance the double pawn weakness that they have. And this can be the same like if you have an isolated queen pawn or if you have hanging pawns, an isolated pawn that's not a queen pawn, right? Like if you have pawn weaknesses, usually you need to look for those other things to make up for the pawn weaknesses. So white's looking to play for the attack here. C takes D, E takes D, bishop to B2. And this move I'm giving a question mark. This is not a great move because it's blocked by the pawns in the center, right? That bishop is on the same diagonal as these pawns. The computer kept wanting knight E5 in this game, which is kind of an odd looking move, but the idea is you want to open up the game quickly. Look to push E4 or C4. It's okay to accept these doubled pawns, but white needs to open up the board for the bishops. Okay, bishop B2 played. Now we see C4 by Petrosian. So he's playing C4 because he wants to lock in that bishop. Bishop C2, bishop G4, queen E1 getting out of the pin. And Reshevsky is okay with this capture because that would be 2 bishops for 2 knights. And this G pawn sitting on F3 would actually support E4, which is what white needs to open up the position. But now we see knight to E4. So Petrosian's saying, okay, I don't want you to play E4. I'm going to stick my knight there. And Reshevsky is saying, well, I really want to play E4. So I'm going to retreat my knight and look to play F3, E4 next. So good idea by white. Knight takes D2, queen takes D2, bishop H5. All right, so now the plan for white, F3, E4, and attack the king. So we need to figure out what do we do defensively here from the black point of view. And if we watch what black does here, he kind of lets white build the attack first, but then finds a creative way to shut down the attack. Let's see what happens. F3, bishop G6, E4, building that big center, queen D7, rook A to E1. And this is not a class on attacking, but white's doing a good job here. Only the B2 bishop needs to get into the attack. Notice how white is bringing every other piece to a square where they can help generate an attack. White is doing the right thing here. D takes E, F takes E. Now at this point, the strongest move is difficult to find. And we're going to have some chat interaction questions coming up. But the strongest move is knight to E5, utilizing the pin of the D pawn. But essentially, this knight needs to get to a more active square before white pushes E5. So this is the way to do it. Stick the knight on E5 right away. But instead, black makes a mistake. Rook F to E8. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is because we're not trying to find the perfect game from black's point of view. We're taking a position now that's worse. We've all been in worse positions where the opponent's looking to generate an attack, and we're going to learn how to defend this position. So the eval right here is +1. White is up +1 according to Stockfish. And white's about to generate an attack. They have the space, they have the bishop pair, rooks and the queen, both ready to attack. All three are ready to attack. Queen F4 played, B5, bishop to D1, trying to activate this bishop through maybe the G4 square. Rook E7, bishop G4, queen E8, E5. Here comes the rolling pawn center. This looks super intimidating. A5, rook E3. Now, this is the first question for you guys in the chat. So put your answers in the YouTube chat box. What move does white want to play? What is white's goal here? And eventually these class videos will be rolled into a defense course. So if you're watching in the course, feel free to use the discussion box. It'll be in the upper right corner. Let's see what you guys think. What does white want to play here? Tony is saying, not sure, I'm bad at these spots. Well, this is good. This will help us recognize these things. Okay, Proust is saying push E6 to undermine F7. Russ is saying bishop C1 to improve the bishop. And also think of moves that aren't necessarily working tactically, but just what's sort of a dream move for white to play. Because the answer I'm looking for hasn't been mentioned yet, but it doesn't work tactically in all scenarios. What's the dream move for white here? White wants to roll black over with the pawns. Russ is saying rook f3 for a super battery. So putting everything on the f7 pawn. Okay, here's a hint. It's a pawn move. There's a pawn move that white would really like to play. Yes, Jonah, that's correct. Pawn to d5. Okay, so d5 is what white wants to play. Yep, Matt got it as well, d5. h4 was also mentioned by Thom. That's a good move too. h4 is a strong move. Trying to play h5. But essentially, white wants to roll over black in this position. Okay, so rook d8 played, helping defend the d5 square. Rook f to e1. Now there is a big threat. White is threatening to play e6. This was Proust's idea in the chat. So next question for you guys. What is the best move for black? And take your time on this one. There's only one best move. What should black play here? And it's the move that Petrosian found in the game. So now we got to start putting our defense hats on. Right, black is just sitting back, waiting, trying to block white's ideas, trying to use prophylaxis. So prophylaxis is when you try to prevent what your opponent's doing before they're able to do it. So we need a prophylactic move. How do we slow down what white's doing? And there's no wrong answers. Smithy Q, I think this is a famous example if I recall. Yes, this one is pretty famous. You're right. I do try to search for famous games first. But then I also try to sprinkle in some games of my own or lower rated players if there aren't any good famous examples. Okay, Proust is saying rook e to d7. Any other ideas? And don't feel bad getting the answer wrong. This is a really tough move to find. I'll give you a hint, guys. Be okay with sacrificing material. So it's okay if you sacrifice. Okay. We're getting a couple of correct answers in the chat. Smithy Q says white can't play e6 if there's a piece already on e6, ... Thom is saying rook e6. So putting the rook on one of these light squares and then playing knight e7 to d5. Look at that. So these pawns are on dark squares. We're going to put our pieces in front of the pawns on light squares. That's exactly right. Russ, I like your idea as well. You're looking to react to e6 with queen f8. The correct answer is rook to e6, though. Brilliant move. So this is sacrificing the exchange. You're putting the rook on a square where it can be taken by a bishop. Okay, so next question for you guys. Why is this move good? White's going to take it. Bishop takes e6. Why is that okay? We're not getting any pawns back in return. We're not getting a ton of activity. Why are we okay with that? Think of imbalances. Think of the plans for each side. This is a deep move, but it's really good to understand why this is the strongest move in the position. So try to think outside the box here, or kind of think along the paths that you maybe don't normally think through when evaluating a position. Okay, Thom is saying the white squares are so weak. Also, the bishop on b2 is on a dark square. and we have an outpost on d5. Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to fully control these light squares, and we're going to keep all of white's pawns on dark squares and keep the rooks running into the pawns, the bishop running into the pawns, and create a position where white's not able to generate any attacking chances. Yeah, Smithy Q, that's exactly right. It's really hard to think of a plan after winning the material. White lost his best minor piece, bishop on g4, and basically has a tall pawn right now sitting on b2. This looks like it's part of a pawn chain. This knight, like Thom keeps mentioning, is going to be a monster on d5. It's worth a rook. So let's see what happens. a4 first, knight e7, the knight heads to the outpost. Bishop takes e6, f takes e6. So white was up about 1.5 according to the engine before the exchange sacrifice, or actually probably for about the last 5 moves, white was up around 1.5. What do you guys think the eval is here? Put your answers in the chat. So white's up the exchange. The bishop on b2 is a bad piece. And there's the potential for a passed pawn over here on the queen side for black. But there are no pawns in exchange for the 2 points of material. So it's just a straight rook for knight. What do we think the eval is here? Thom says 0.00. And I think if you were to just show this position to club level players and say, what's the eval? I would say 95% of players are going to guess too high in the direction for white. Just because we're so ingrained in looking at material first. That's how we're taught in the beginning. And it's really hard to rewire our brains to just take a holistic view. Like, what are all the imbalances? Material is a huge factor, and that's usually the starting point. But you need to weigh all the other factors. So the eval here is 0.2 for white. And I think 0.00 is a good guess. And if you were to let Stockfish run even longer than mine's running, I think it would go to 0.00. So the position is equal. Queen f1 by white. Yep, and a good point in the chat. This is an isolated pawn as well. But we're learning in this game that this is not a weakness. There's no way for white to easily attack it, and it's easily defended, and it's kind of the all-star of the position, actually, by preventing d5 from being played. Okay, so now knight to d5. Next question for you guys. Which side would you rather play here, white or black? The position is equal, according to the computer. Which side would you rather play, white or black? Tony is saying white. You're up the exchange. Jonah is saying black. Because this is a position where you can look at what the engine says, 0.00. But if you think about this in terms of human versus human, one side has a plan that's more obvious, and that's black. Black's plan is to push the queenside pawns and create a passer. I don't think that white has an obvious plan here. Yeah. So Thom and Smithy Q are kind of saying the same thing. Russ says he prefers white with rook f3 as a plan. But I think in this position, it's easier to play black because even though you're down 2 points, you have a clear plan. But there is the risk that maybe as black, you open up the position too much, and then all of a sudden the rooks come into the game. But I think human against human, at let's say a master level, black is probably winning this game more often than white, even though the computer says equal and white's up 2 points. Okay, rook f3 played. Now, if you look at the last 2 moves for white, queen back to f1, rook to f3, essentially white is saying, I don't have an attack anymore, right? Even though this rook is sitting on the open file, it's not threatening anything. And the rook is sort of playing defense and just avoiding the squares that black attacks. And this queen went back to a defensive position. So white is admitting here that they have no attack anymore. And now look at black take the initiative. Bishop to d3. There is only one good move in this position for white. And this is something that's hard to understand. The natural instinct here is to play queen f2. The eval is minus 1.5 now. After b4, black has a really big advantage. 1.5, that's close to winning with best play. And if you were to let the engine run to depth 40 or 50, I don't know if it would say black is winning or a draw, but really white should never win this position anymore. So the position's going downhill extremely quickly. The only good move for white, and Reshevsky did play it in the game, is rook takes d3. White had to give back the exchange. C takes d3, queen takes d3. So now we have an equal endgame, but white is up one pawn. Eval is still equal though, right? So even though white is up one pawn, black still has the dominant knight. This bishop is passive. And there are some winning chances, I would say, for black. So b4 was played. C takes, a takes, a5, rook a8, rook a1, queen c6. So black's trying to round up this pawn. I'm going through this kind of quickly. This game does end in a draw. Queen c4, h6, h3, e2, rook b1, king h8, bishop e1. They agreed to a draw. So essentially what's going to happen is both of these pawns are going to be captured. There's a good chance the queens and the rooks come off the board. And then white really can't do anything with this extra pawn on d4. So I think this was a great example of a defense game because it shows how to challenge our viewpoints of material, right? White had that big advantage, +1, +1.5, and those pawns were rolling through the center of the board. And black found that all-star move. Let me go back to it. Rook to e6 right here. So this position's around a +1. Rook to e6 was played. And what I like about this move is the best way for white to keep the advantage is not easy to find, right? So we're using resources to make it difficult for our opponents to attack. We're not just letting them get what they want. And a 0.9 where you have to not take the rook is very difficult to play for white. You know, I'm looking at the top moves and it's saying rook to g3 is the #1 move. And then after knight e7, if you don't want to take the rook, you play bishop to c1. Well, then knight to d5 comes. And it's like at some point, if you don't take the rook, then black's not down any material. And all of a sudden, you're seeing this knight become a monster. You know this bishop is still open. You know that black's going for the passed pawn. Maybe that rook comes queenside. Right? So as white, it's not easy to react to this. Okay, let's check the chat. Russ is saying, is this something we can find without calculating deeply to see where it goes? Yeah, I think this is one, Russ, where you can just play based on your understanding of the position and the imbalances, right? So when you play rook e6 here, you don't have to do a ton of calculation. If you calculate that this position is better than the position where you don't have the pawn on e6, that's pretty much good enough to play it because white's not doing anything too crazy here, right? There aren't any big tactics on the board. There are no great pawn breaks for white. This is completely shut down. And if you know this is your plan, that the knight's going to land here, I already feel comfortable with this position. White lost their attack. The rooks aren't doing much for white. And we have this plan on the queen side, or we could just hold tight on the queen side if we're content with just holding the position. So you can start to find these moves based on intuition. So in other words, is it a principle blocking the pawn chain or something like that? I think in this case, what we're doing is we're just trying to restrict the opponent's play. So restrict the opponent's pieces, restrict the opponent's pawns. I would say that's the principle. The principle of blocking a pawn chain seems too specific to me. But you're just trying to overall restrict what white's trying to do. Okay, next game. Karpov against Kasparov. Karpov has the white pieces. This is from the World Chess Championship that was played in 1984. This is game number 9. Does anyone remember? Are there any chess historians in the chat? How many games was this championship? This was the one that had like 30 games or something crazy. Because the setup was you had to win by so many points. I think that's what it was. Anyways, this is game number 9, and this match took place in 1984 and 1985, but this game was played on October 5th. That tells you how long the match was. So in the first game, Petrosian defended against a specific threat, the threat of playing e6. In this game, Karpov is defending against Kasparov's style. This is going to be a lesson in how to neutralize an aggressive player by denying them those complications. Don't give them those tactical positions that they like to play. Okay, Matt is saying it was first to 6. Yeah, that's right. First to 6 wins. That's insane. Okay, d4, d5, c4, e6, knight f3, c5. This is the Tarrasch defense, a favorite defense of Kasparov. It tends to give black an isolated queen pawn, which is what we're going to see in this game. And if you're an attacking player, oftentimes you like having the isolated queen pawn because that helps you generate an attack. IQP gains you a little extra space, and you can use it as a launching point for your attack. Here we go. C takes D, E takes D. Now, I want you guys to recognize this pawn center. You pretty much know from this pawn center that black is going to be the side accepting a pawn weakness. So how do you know that? Because something is going to happen in the middle to relieve this tension. There's a few options. Either these two pawns simply trade off. That leaves black with an IQP. Or black pushes this pawn. That leaves black with a backward pawn on d5. Or this c pawn gets defended by the b pawn, and then white captures, and black captures back with a pawn, and then black has hanging pawns. So really, one of those 3 scenarios is going to happen. And all 3 of those scenarios are similar. All 3 of those scenarios, black accepts a pawn weakness, but they need to play actively, or they have a pawn structure that allows them to play more actively to have compensation for that pawn weakness. So already in this position, move number 4, you should start to recognize that black is going to have a pawn weakness coming up. And that can help dictate how you play this game. Black needs to be the attacker here, right? Black has to have compensation for that pawn weakness. And that's why Kasparov is okay playing this type of opening. He's fine taking the weakness because he wants tactics and complications. Now, Karpov plays g3. I like this move a lot. When you know an isolated queen pawn is likely, the kingside fianchetto is probably the best setup against it on average. The reason for that is this bishop likes to go to d6, help attack the white kingside. And when you have a fianchetto bishop on g2 with this structure, it makes it very difficult for black to attack. And then if black can't generate an attack, then the pawn weaknesses become the highlight of the game. And picture this, if black pushed past with the backward d pawn, then the bishop on g2 is in a really good spot. So g3, super strong move by Karpov. Not allowing Kasparov to get the best attacking structures. Okay, so both sides get developed here. And now we see c takes d4 by Kasparov. So he's finally accepting the isolated queen pawn, but he wants to have active pieces and open lines. So black wants chaos and attacking chances. And what white wants here is to just calmly take black down, right? We just want to simplify things, not allow any attacking chances for our opponent. Knight takes d4, h6. Okay, here's the question for you guys. Question for the chat. Black has the isolated queen pawn. As white, what's your general strategy? So put your answers in the chat box. How would you define your strategy here as white? What do we want to do? How do we play against this isolated queen pawn? So we know what black wants to do. Black wants to generate an attack. Keep lines open, create some weaknesses in the white camp. Thom is correct. Control d4, and in general, look for exchanges. Smithy is saying trade minor pieces, keep the d4 square blockaded, aim for the endgame grind. That's exactly right. Okay, so bishop e3 played, and this move is annoying for black. This is a deep prophylactic move by Karpov. You could play bishop takes f6 here. You could play bishop to f4, but he chose bishop back to e3. So that bishop went out to g5, which is normally a good square against an IQP. You know, oftentimes you do take this knight and try to win this pawn. But now he's retreating. And the idea is he just wants to control the dark squares, right? So he's controlling d4, which makes this pawn on d5 stuck. And really, he's just trying to stop all of Kasparov's fun. He's saying, I'm not going to give you anything you want. I'm not going to allow you to push that pawn to d4 at any point. e4 is under full control by white right now as well. So there's no knight to e4. Okay, so that's kind of going to be the theme of this game, is can we make it a boring game for black? We want to make sure that black's having no fun at all. Rook e8, queen b3, and I like this move. It connects the rooks, but it also threatens the d pawn. And knight a5 is the only good move in response. Queen c2, bishop g4. So notice how Kasparov's playing actively. He wants the rook on c8 lined up with the queen. He's trying to get all of these pieces active. Knight to f5. So another thing to note here is, even though Karpov is playing solid, he still looks for these moves that can create threats, right? So he's looking for a move that maybe trades off one of the black attackers, right? You don't want to just sit back and always play passively. Like, you don't want to necessarily just play rook d1, rook c1, and sit and wait. You still want to look for those active moves. So play solid, but look to play active at the same time. So knight f5, rook c8, and bishop to d4. So now that bishop's on pretty much the perfect square, right? It cuts through the whole board from the middle. There's threats with maybe knight takes e7 followed by bishop takes f6. And then the d pawn could fall in the end, right? So white's playing actively here, but also controlling black's plans. Bishop c5, this is the best move for black, but the problem is it's offering to trade off a set of minor pieces. Karpov takes. And now knight to e3. Bishop back to e6. And notice how all of these black pieces are defending. What are the white pieces doing? Attacking. Oops, wrong arrow. So we have this interesting position where, even though we're the defensive player, and black has the isolated queen pawn and is looking to attack, and we know they're an attacking player in general, we're making black react by defending, right? Black's not having any fun here. One question that you might have is, why not d4? d4 is a good move, but white has an advantage here still. Rook a to d1 is the response, or knight takes g4, followed by rook a to d1. So it's not a big threat for black to play d4. So Kasparov's saying, okay, let's keep pieces on the board for now, and maybe we'll attack later. And then rook a d1 was played. Queen c8, queen a4. So notice here how Karpov isn't trying to mate Kasparov. He's just trying to annoy him, right? So you can use this strategy yourselves against attacking players. Bait them into taking riskier decisions than they normally would, right? So control all of their threats that they should go for, right? The practical attacking chances. Try to shut all those down. Make them take the crazy attacking chances, because they will. Inevitably, they are going to go for some crazy move that opens up their position, that creates a weakness, and then you can pounce on that. So this strategy works. I've used it in over-the-board classical games too when I know my opponent well. and they're super aggressive, you can just kind of sit and watch. And you can even predict, like, oh, they might play g5 in a position like this, because that seems like it's the only move to generate some hope of an attack. And I know in my mind that g5 is a terrible positional choice, and Stockfish would probably be like rolling on the ground laughing at that move. But you can sort of predict when an attacking player is going to just lash out and do something irrational. Okay, so queen a4, just trying to annoy black. Rook d8, rook d3, preparing to double on the d file. a6, and the idea with a6 is Kasparov wants to play knight to c4, but if you don't play a6 first, there's going to be a queen takes a7 in the end, and that's going to be almost winning for white. So a6 defends the a pawn first. Rook to d1. This position is only a slight edge for white now. The best move was actually to take the pawn and go into this line, trade everything, and play queen d1. The eval is 0.8, and that's the Stockfish preferred line. But the players don't know the eval during the game, of course. And the reason that I think Karpov played rook f to d1 is because he likes his position so much that he doesn't feel a need to simplify it. Right? You could just simplify it. That kills black's attack too. But now he's in the driver's seat. Not only does black not have an attack, black's starting to play defensively. Right? So there's no rush for Karpov. He's taking a 0.4 edge instead of a 0.8 edge. But he knows that now the position's in his favor. He can sense that. Knight c4. Knight takes c4. And there's no d takes back due to rook takes d8. So Kasparov has to keep the isolated pawn. Queen a5, rook c5, queen b6, rook d7. And now rook to d4. Question for you guys in the chat. Does black have any active plans here? What do you think? If you see an active plan, put your answer in the chat. Or if the answer is no, put that answer in the chat. Matt's also correct. They didn't even think in terms of evals back in 1984. There was no computer eval worth anything. That's 100% right. This is not related to the course, but tomorrow is my birthday, and I was born in 1985. So it's 40th birthday. Yeah, Tony's saying I go with no. I agree with that. I don't see any active plans for black. And this is really just the definition of a blockade. The rook sits so comfortably in front of this pawn. Kasparov can do nothing. No pawn breaks and no active plans. Queen c7, offering the queen trade. He ran out of ideas. Karpov accepts. And now the annoying thing for black is white is still up like half a pawn here, according to the computer. And black is just stuck playing defense. There's just the one pawn weakness, and there's no compensation for it. All of the black pieces are sitting back passively. This is the type of position you guys should go for in your games. If you have an opponent with the isolated queen pawn, this is a dream scenario. You can milk this position for the next 50 moves if you want, right? Black is just stuck reacting to whatever white does here. So we're going to see some slow moves now. And the eval does go down to 0.00 at some point here. But really, white has all the practical chances. Rook d4 played. This is interesting. Allowing black to take and give white an isolated pawn, which he does do right here. And now, the last question for you guys. Why is white okay with that? Can you tell me why white's okay with accepting their own isolated queen pawn? Thanks, Tony and Matt, for the happy birthdays. This is a deep concept, right? We just took one imbalance, the isolated queen pawn advantage, and we gave that away. But what did we get in return? Black's bishop can never attack our pawn on d4. So it's not as big of a weakness as black's pawn on d5. That's correct. That's what Smithy Q says. What we've done is we've permanently cemented that pawn as a weakness on a light square. Our knight can forever attack it, and our bishop can forever attack it, and our king might be able to come in down the line, right? So it's still a 2-result game. It's just the imbalance has changed. We got rid of black's rook, which was their most active piece. Now the whole focus is on the d-pawn, and maybe we can create a principle of 2 weaknesses and find something else to attack while black is stuck in the d-pawn, stuck defending the d-pawn. Okay, let's go fast forward a little bit to where black makes a mistake. So notice how white's looking to play kingside. Karpov does defend this pawn. Now it's a knight versus bishop scenario. Still slight edge for white because that bishop can't really attack any white pawns, and this knight can forever pressure this pawn. Now, interestingly, right here, the eval is 0.05. Kasparov is arguably the strongest player of all time, at least for his generation. Maybe Carlsen's up there. That's up for debate. But Karpov is up there as well, right? These are 2 of the strongest players of all time. Black makes a move here that essentially loses the game in an equal endgame with not much going on. But the reason that it works is because white's been grinding black down this whole time, right? It's a position where Kasparov has to just be patient, and he wants to attack. He likes to make things happen. He plays g takes h4 here. That's a losing move. The reason g takes h4 is a losing move is white plays knight to g2, sacrificing a pawn, and now this king is able to infiltrate. So once the king infiltrates in combination with the knight dominating the bishop, black is helpless. Isn't that crazy? So really here, black just needs to sit and do nothing. King e6, bishop d3. He needs to have a nothing move. But instead he takes, and Karpov has this genius idea. Even g takes h4 is very close to winning for white. But the strongest move is knight to g2. Just this really nice positional concept. Takes. And now we're going to see white's able to grind black down here with the king coming in. Right? Combination king and knight. There goes one pawn. There goes a second pawn. Very quickly, this falls apart. Look at how helpless black's bishop is. There goes a pawn. And black resigns. So that game, I think, was a great example of how to play against an attacking player, right? So Kasparov is possibly the greatest attacker in history. He didn't get to launch a single attack in this game. And what you guys can take away from this is defense isn't always just reacting to quick threats. Defense can also be preventing your opponent from ever getting to threaten you in the first place, right? If you can completely shut down the game, like Karpov did here, there's not even really threats to react to, because before black creates the threats, you're looking for what pieces could create threats, and then let's shut down even the opportunity of creating a threat, right? So it's not just reacting to the threat. It's not allowing the threat in the first place. So I really like this game. I feel like Karpov treated Kasparov like a player that's a couple tiers lower, right? This felt like a master defeating a club level player or something. Just full control the whole game. Karpov was never worse. All right, let's go to game number 3. Any questions so far on the first 2 games, or just general defense questions? Jackie was saying, yeah, no real attack. I really love winning with a positional grind too. Like if you can play defense and then convert like that every game, I think that's a fun style of chess. Even though you'll be one of the last games in the tournament hall to finish, when it's low risk and your opponent's just squirming, It's really fun, especially over the board because you get to watch him be uncomfortable. I know it sounds mean. This is kind of a shout out to Danya. Danya had a great impression of Yasser Seirawan. And in his impressions, he would always mention FM Geller in Seirawan's stories. We have Geller here with the white pieces and Korchnoi with the black pieces. So we're going to look at this from black's point of view, the defense side. And Geller is going to throw everything here at Korchnoi, including a dangerous pass pawn and a king hunt. And Korchnoi survives this by counterattacking. Okay, so he's playing defense, but he's looking to counterpunch. And this is something I want you guys to do in your games too. Whenever you're playing defense, always look for your counterattacks. Okay, so we get the Alekine's defense. And white decides to play the 4-pawn attack. So pretty obvious why it's called that. Massive center for white. And this is scary to face as black. Now, what black wants to do is prove those pawns are overextended and create weaknesses with those pawns. Okay, so this is all fairly standard. And white does have a pretty big advantage here according to the engine. You don't see the Alekhine played much at the highest levels for this reason. The space is an advantage for white. So white's got a clear advantage here, already around 0.6. Okay, so white looks dominant, space advantage, attacking pieces, black is cramped. This is the type of position where club players tend to panic, right? From the black side, a club player might panic here, do the wrong thing. The strongest move in the position, and I think it's the strongest idea overall, is to play f6. f6 is a way to fight back against white's big space advantage. But if you watch Ben Feingold videos, you're taught never to play f6. If you're worried about your own king safety and you're losing games due to king safety, you don't like playing f6 probably. But this is the way to fight back against white's big center. Okay, we're looking for some counter chances here. E takes f6 is the best move, but the problem is now white's losing a bit of their center control, right? We know that white's an attacking player, and we can also use that to our advantage. White wants control of the center. White doesn't want to trade off that e-pawn, right? They would probably rather that we take, and then maybe they take back with their d-pawn. Move their queen out of the way, avoid the queen trade, keep that strong pawn on e5. We can use that against our opponent. So bishop f4 was played. Knight c6. Now finally e takes f. Bishop takes f6. d5. Okay, question for you guys in the chat. What's the best move for black? There's one clearly best move, and it actually gives black a slight edge. What do you guys think? What should black play here? And I think the instinct in this position actually gets us into a lot of trouble. My instinctive move, not good. Obviously, white's threatening d takes c6. We need to react to this. My first thought is, can we take the pawn? E takes d5. And my second thought is, should we retreat the knight with knight e7, allow the pawns to swap that way? The best move, though, and Thom just mentioned this in the chat, knight to a5. That's correct. We want to look to counterattack, right? Even though we are on defense, look to create some issues or at least things to think about for the opponent. Knight a5, creating this double attack on c4. That's correct. Knight e5 for white. Bishop takes. Bishop takes. And this is a situation that I think we've all faced before. Our aggressive opponent is gambiting a pawn. Smithy Q asked in Discord, what do we do in these positions where we have to take the pawn? This is one of those examples where you have to take the pawn. The only good move is knight takes c4, but you can see there's a bishop takes g7 coming, followed by maybe queen d4. It's the only move, though. We have to take the pawn. You can't sit and play passively here, queen d7. It's a massive advantage for white if they get pawn to b3 in, because then our knights do nothing over here. So we're all in. We got to go for the gambited pawn. So here, white trades and then grabs the pawn back with bishop takes g7. This is ripping open the black king side. The white king is relatively safe here. Now, knight to e3 was played. Knight to e3 and king takes g7 have almost the same eval, but I like knight to e3 here because we're looking to counterattack, right? We're not allowing white to get queen d4 check in. We're trying to find our own chances and using some tactics to play defense. Queen e2, knight takes f1, bishop takes f8. Material is still equal, but what Korchnoi does is looks to attack again. Knight takes h2. Let's try to open up white's king. And here we're going to see something really cool coming up. Bishop c5, knight g4. Question for you guys now. What is black trying to do here? So this whole knight takes h2 idea was really nice. If king takes h2, black has a big advantage. With queen h4 check, queen d4 check, picking this bishop up later with the rook, black has the edge. So white couldn't go with king takes h2. Bishop c5 holds equality, knight g4. But what's the idea for black here? What do you guys think? We're allowing d takes e6, which gives back our pawn. We are up a pawn in this position. Dom says queen h4. That's correct. So queen h4 is our idea. We brought that knight from f1 to h2 to g4. Now we want queen h4. D takes e6, queen h4. And the lesson here is that passive defense can often fail. So when possible, give your opponent something to worry about, right? White plays e7 here. This looks terrifying, but we know we have rook e8, and we know we have threats on the king side against the white king. So queen h2 check played, king over, queen f4, king g1, rook e8. Black is fine here. Black is not busted. This pawn's not going anywhere. And rook e8 is a simple defense. And this was all calculated in advance by Korchnoi, who's playing black. Korchnoi knew he could defend against this passed e-pawn while still keeping his aggressive play over here on the king side. Rook f1, for example, runs into queen h2 mate. That's the move white would love to play. Queen f3, offering a queen trade. Korchnoi says no. Queen back out to h5, and now knight h2 check is threatened. Queen d5 check, king g7. And here, interestingly, queen d4 check was played. It's a mistake due to king g6. So Korchnoi is not sitting back playing passive, even though he is sort of on the defense here. He's reacting to checks right now. He plays king g6. The king's actually safer up here on an active square, because back on g8, there's more chances maybe of a back rank issue. The king just has less squares in general. So he runs up to g6. Now, Geller wasn't able to find a mate, and he starts retreating. Knight e2, threatening knight to f4 check. But you know that black has queen h1. So this is really just a defensive move, knight e2. Knight goes back. There, queen g1 was better, and now black's in the driver's seat. Pawn b6, queen d8, knight f6 to defend the rook. Bishop a3, bishop e4, threatening queen takes g2, queen d2. A nice little move, c5, shutting out the bishop, making this pawn unprotected. e4, c4, b5, and then the c pawn supports bishop to d3 check. White resigns. So very quickly, black went from, oh, this position is scary. That g7 pawn got captured. And the opening in general was kind of scary, right? White had the big pawn center. So we had this position, black's playing defense. And then we got to this position where we had to accept a pawn. And our king's about to be wide open, right? This line could have been played. But the problem is, what does black have in terms of compensation for the exposed king? Right? You don't. So I think the main takeaway is you don't want a defensive position where you feel you're just playing passively without anything in return. When you're playing defense, you want to look for counter punches. You want to look to pose your opponent's problems still. Even if you're in one of those positions where you're up material and you feel you're just stuck playing passive, keep looking for opportunities. So this knight e3 idea, in my opinion, is why black won the game. Right? He was able to make a position that was a little bit messier. It wasn't something like the Karpov game where he could just sit and control everything. He was being attacked. His kingside position was ripped open. He looked to create counter threats while still defending. He gave up the e-pawn. He knew rook e8 was coming. And in this position, he had good practical chances to win. And white messed up here with queen d4 check and knight to g1. Both of those moves were mistakes. And all of a sudden, black is winning. A couple moves later, resignation. Yeah, Thomas saying, wow, beating Geller with the Alekhine. That's exactly right. That's crazy. Okay, we are going to do one course giveaway now. So get ready to put your answers in the chat. What I'm going to do is a random number generator. Okay, so put a number 1 through 10, and if there's a tie, we'll do a tie break round. Put your answer in the chat. If your number gets selected and you're the winner, you get a free ChessGoals course. 2 people said 5. 1 person said 3. Matt says 42. 1 to 10, guys. 1 to 10. No 42s, no 11s. It's okay. You can put another answer. Okay, we have 2 5s, 2 3s, a 9. No one wants an even number? No love for the even numbers? 6, 7? Anyone? No 6 7s? If you're just coming in, good timing. We're doing the free course giveaway. Put an answer in the chat, a number 1 through 10. Yeah, there's a few people that haven't put an answer yet, but we're about to draw the number. I wonder if I can show this easily on screen. It's capturing my other window. I guess not. Okay. Are we ready? Jackie's saying one last time, so they're letting someone else win. Okay, thanks, Jackie. Lifetime member. Okay, here we go. The first number drawn is a 1. Okay, I'm going to redo it. 6. 10. No one said 10 either. Okay, 5 was chosen, but we have a tie. Tony in a boy's life. Okay. One of you pick a number 1 or 2. Tony or a boy's life. Whoever puts their number in first, that's their guess. It's a tiebreaker. Tony says 2. Okay, a boy's life, you're 1. Tony, you are a 2. Here we go. It's okay, semicolon. 1 was chosen. A boy's life. You won a free course. You can email me, Matt at ChessGoals. or message me in Discord. Let me know which course you want. Actually, let's just pause here and talk a little bit about the new year. Which courses are you guys working on? It doesn't have to be ChessGoals. Which courses are you guys working on currently, or do you plan on focusing on for the new year? Or it could be even a broader question like, do you have any changes in your study plan or your approach for the new year coming up? So I'm actually looking to do something for the new year for ChessGoals too. I don't know if it would be like a revamp of our study plans a little bit. I want to add some like weekly little videos for encouragement. So say the beginner ChessGoals blueprint, I could have 12 videos that are maybe just like a minute long that just kind of give encouragement and say, here's what's coming out this week. Here's the recommendations. But then that gives you something every week to go check in on the course player. Tony's saying, I'm binging hard this month. Okay, working on college courses, Colin. Good idea. Tom is a lifelong E4 player wanting to try D4. Tom, have you played the Catalan before? I love the Catalan from the white side. I don't know your rating, Tom, but I feel like you're a pretty strong player. That's the impression I get. And Catalan helped me get to the national master level. Over the board classical, I've had really strong results with the Catalan. Oh, wow. 2130 FIDE. That's awesome. Jonah is saying, continuing the dynamic Slav. Yeah, dynamics. I want to do a dynamic Slav middle games course. That will be coming at some point. Get some game examples for the Slav. Outside of just our YouTube bonus content. Okay, one more game beating up on Gary Kasparov. I'm sorry, Gary. What if Gary was a ChessGoals fan? We do have a Catalan course, yes. And the Catalan course works with our 1D4 course. And there's a bundle called the Complete Catalan. What is it about the Catalan? Catalan gives you similar structures with long-term positional advantages that you can play with. And I feel like, above a certain level, usually players have a good defense against the Catalan, which is probably around 2000. But below that, oftentimes you can get really good positions and like easy low-risk positions with white. But around the 2000 level, you'll find that players have some memorized defenses, but then you can still look for ways to surprise them. And that's what we do in our Catalan course. Like we have some offbeat lines that give white some good practical chances and try to throw the opponents off a bit. Oh, mental strength and psychology. Nice. Okay. Game number 4, Kramnik. Vladimir Kramnik, one of the best theoreticians and one of the most influential chess players in history, especially in terms of opening theory. Obviously, there's been some cheating accusations by Kramnik in the last few years, but in terms of chess ability, Kramnik is one of the most well-respected opening theoreticians ever. So what we're going to see in this game is Kramnik with the white pieces, Kasparov with the black pieces. Similar to the Karpov-Kasparov game, Kramnik is going to show how to shut down an attacking player. So we get what's called the Grunfeld defense. Kasparov likes the Grunfeld because it allows white to build a big center, but then he can attack that center, right? So the Grunfeld is a fighting opening from the black side. So this is all standard. And we reach the position where white gets a big space advantage and black looks to play actively here. So in this position, for example, black has the b7 pawn attacked. Kasparov could play pawn to b6. That's a good move. Just keeping everything solid. Instead, he plays pawn to a6. And he's looking to maybe play pawn to b5 and play aggressive. So Kramnik here grabs the pawn. So he's not grabbing this pawn because he's greedy. At least I don't think so. He's grabbing that pawn to disrupt black's coordination. And in the process, he's accepting doubled F pawns, right? So the G file is going to be open. His king is going to probably be sitting on G1. That does give Kasparov some attacking chances, but he's trying to disrupt the main plan that Kasparov had of playing pawn to B5 and attacking that way. Okay, so let's see what happens. Bishop takes F3, G takes F3. Now, question for you guys in the chat. Kramnik has damaged his own pawn structure, doubled F pawns, to win the B pawn. Rook on B7. Question for you guys. Do you feel White's king is safe or in danger? So there's this open G file. Do you feel that White's king is safe or in danger in this position? Because this is critical in terms of helping you find moves like rook takes B7. You have to weigh the material with the other imbalances in the position, and one of the big ones is king safety. And king safety is also the reason that most advanced beginner and beginner players lose games. Or I should actually say advanced beginner to like early intermediates. Because what you find is at the lowest levels, big blunders just determine the games, and that's it. And then once you get to like advanced beginner and lower intermediate levels, those big mistakes become less and less, but you still have these tactical slugfests all the time. And the side with the exposed king, I shouldn't say almost always, but way more often than 50%, the side with the king in danger loses the tactical slugfest. So like just keeping your king safe is huge to improving your record if you're in that sort of, I would say 800 to 1200 range. Okay, I think you guys know that I wanted you to say safe because everyone is saying safe. That could be part of it. But yeah, White's G file is pretty safe. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't ways for Black to attack it. We still need to be aware of what Black is doing. What we've done is we've shut down the queenside play for Black. There was no pawn to B5, and our king is relatively safe with this new potential weakness, the G file. Right? So we just need to make sure now that Black's not able to attack our king, and we're up a pawn. And the eval is close to equal still, so it's not like White is winning here. It's 0.3. Knight c6, bishop c4. They both castle. CD, CD. Bishop takes d4. Now here, queen takes a5 could be played, going for a queen trade, but knight takes a5 starts to give Black an advantage. So Kramnik doesn't go for this neutralizing queen trade. Instead, he plays bishop to d5. We've seen a bishop on d5 already. Bishop on d5 points at the rook in the corner and points at the king. That's a dominant square for the bishop, right? So Kramnik is playing against an aggressive player, and he's trying to not only limit what Black does, but put his own pieces on active squares, right? He's looking to not just play defense, but to make that aggressive player squirm a little bit on their side of the board. Bishop c3 played. Kasparov keeps queens on the board because he knows he needs some attacking chances, or at least he wants some attacking chances, right? Queen c1, knight to d4. Active, aggressive players look to always move their pieces forward. That's what Kasparov is doing. These pieces are coming at us. Knight to e2 check, huge threat. King and queen fork. Now bishop takes d4 played, trading off Black's best attacking piece. Bishop takes d4, and rook takes e7. So Kramnik is back to being up a pawn, but this king's a little bit exposed. The bishop points there, and this queen wants to find her way over towards the white king. All right, so Kasparov is still going to look to attack. He starts with rook a7, so this rook is being attacked. He tries to trade off our best piece. Rook takes, bishop takes. Now, question for you guys here. What's the eval? What do we think the eval is in this position? And if you want to answer, also, are you happy in this position as white? Do you feel you have winning chances? Do you feel you're just defending up a pawn because your king's exposed? And what's the eval? So really the main weakness for white is the open G file. Both f-pawns are pinned by bishops. Our bishop is supported though, which is nice. But there is potential, like let's say the black king moves, f5 is played, maybe this rook gets into the game and these pawns are weak. Or this queen could try to get over here to the king side. We don't quite have that same attack against the black king. Okay, I'm seeing 0.4 and 0.7 for evals here. Thom is saying, I'm very happy with the monster of bishop on d5. Yeah, so the eval is 0.9 for white. So if you're happy with this position as white, that's a good interpretation of the position. 0.9, wall up a pawn, which is a doubled pawn. That means that really black doesn't have any significant compensation for the pawn. Now f4 was played. Now this move might surprise you. Okay, we are up the pawn. We're looking to play solid usually, right? Solid first. But what did we talk about in the prior games? Look to play solid, but also look to play active, and also look to control your opponent's plans. Black wants to attack us on the dark squares. One of the best ways for them to do that is to use this diagonal. Right? Get the bishop on b8 to h2 and the queen over there as well. Maybe the queen comes out this way. Somehow black needs to figure out a way to attack the white king, and the h2 square is the most vulnerable square. So by playing f4, it looks like we're maybe exposing our king a bit more, but what we're doing is we're controlling the dark squares. This is a really strong move. Queen to d8 played. Queen to c3. So this queen's kind of ready to come across to help on the king side. Bishop to b8, attacking this pawn. Queen f3, queen h4, right? So you can feel the pressure coming now. This pawn's double attacked. The h2 pawn through this x-ray is also double attacked. And now a question for you guys in the chat. What move should white play here? There's one move that's stronger than the rest. And it was played by Kramnik. Thom says pawn to e5. Trying to shut down that bishop on b8. Any other guesses? Jonah says e5. Yes, that's correct. e5. So e5 highlights the strength of this pawn on f4. Kramnik played f4 early with this idea. Pawns on dark squares shut out the bishop. This guy's on a light square. Yes, we lost the support of this bishop, but it could always retreat back to b3. The bishop doesn't really need to attack a8 anymore. The main thing it's doing is pinning that pawn to the king. So we're improving the position now. These pawns shut out the bishop. Best move, and really the only move in the position to keep the game close, is pawn to g5. Kasparov plays it. So he's potentially opening his own king, but it might go to h8. Rook comes to g8. He has to play actively here. Now look at this move by Kramnik. I love this move, just like this f4, e5 idea. He plays rook to e1. If f takes g5 is played, bishop takes e5, there are attacking chances again for black. Rook to e1 though, giving back a pawn, but knowing that we're still shutting down what black is trying to do. It was really the only good reply. And after queen takes f4, Kasparov often offers a queen trade. Kramnik takes. And does this position not remind you of the Karpov game? Karpov against Kasparov? And it almost makes you think that maybe this was kind of Kramnik's playbook, right? Because we're in this position again, where the eval's around half a pawn for white, just like the Karpov game. But really, white's having all the fun here, right? Black has these doubled pawns, this potential weak pawn, the rook's passive, the bishop's pretty passive. White's having all the fun in this endgame. So we're playing against an attacking player. We shut down all their attacking potential. We played solid, but we also looked to play actively as well, right? So kind of, you want to just think in terms of always recalculating imbalances, always recalculating the plans. Can we shut down the opponent's plans while also making them think about difficult decisions? Don't get stuck in a one set track of, okay, let's just defend, 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 right? A lot of players think win material and just hold and defend. I don't want you guys to think that way. Sure, win material, but still think about everything else in the position. Like constantly keep your head on the swivel. What is Black trying to do? How can they attack? How can we shut down their pieces? Can we trade off their good pieces? Can we create our own threats? Can we counterattack? Right? You want to always be thinking about all these things. Defense isn't just sitting on your hands waiting for them to collapse. Now, when you're a beginner, some players will attack so hard that they're just blundering, right? So that strategy can work. And I think that's why players run into trouble. Because when you're a beginner, you might learn to fend off those attacks. When the attack is done, they've sacrificed like 4 points of material and the game's over. Easy conversion. Well, when your opponents are only sacrificing 1 pawn, or maybe they're sacrificing like a pawn weakness and that's it, let's say an IQP, you can't just sit back and think that they're going to collapse, right? They're going to probably checkmate you or create a strong attack. So you need to be thinking about all of these things constantly when you're defending. Okay, so now e6 was played. And this is where Kramnik starts to go on the offensive, looks to create threats. F takes E, rook takes E, and there's some nasty discovered checks in the air. This pawn is also hanging. King G7 played, and now Kramnik goes up a pawn. Still draw territory with best play. And we're going to go through this kind of quickly, but the idea is this bishop is stronger than that bishop again. It's anchored by a pawn. Still probably a draw with best play, but Kramnik just took this game, simplified it, gave Kasparov no attacking chances. So he avoids the rook trade, keeps some winning chances. You don't want to just go into opposite colored bishops here. That's an easy draw. And here Kasparov makes a mistake by trying to play actively himself, right? So if your opponent is an aggressive player, the best move here is to play rook a5 and just sit and wait. Like that's a case where in terms of Black's defense here, he does need to just wait and play for a draw. But he should still look to play actively. But the move he plays here creates some problems because this king hides on h3. And now white gets the initiative, right? This king could potentially come up. This rook is not helping stop this pawn. Rook to b6 played, and all of a sudden there's a tactic, bishop to d5, threatening rook e6, and the rook. Kasparov resigns. But even in this position, if he plays like king to g7, for example, a6, this is a win with best play. So white's already got to winning territory because rook g6 check is coming. This pawn will likely drop. Eventually this king is going to move up, and this rook doesn't have time to take h2 because this pawn runs. Support of the bishop. Game over for Black. So another excellent example of how to shut down an attacking player. Just looking for what they're trying to do, knowing their style, taking them to an endgame is almost always a good bet. Like even an equal endgame, right? If it's a dry equal endgame, but especially if it's a dry equal endgame where you feel you're the only one that really can press, think of Magnus Carlsen. How many wins did he get, especially when he was at his peak FIDE rating, where he would just grind people down in these style endgames? And he wasn't the biggest attacker, but he would play attackers and he could take them down in equal endgames where he just shut down all their fun. So 4 defensive games today. Any questions before we wrap up today's class? We are going to have more defense classes the rest of this month. And then we also will probably have one the first Saturday or Sunday in January. But we're going to stick with this defense theme. Tom says, before it's too late, thank you so much for your time with us, Matt. I'm really enjoying spending some German afternoons with you all. Thank you, Tom. It's great having you. This live class had a little smaller turnout than the last ones, but that's also a bit on me because I didn't promote it as much with the holidays. We'll probably have a larger audience in the next few. Tony says, thanks. Thanks for watching, Tony. Well, maybe I should ask you guys, do you for sure want to do defense the rest of this month, or should we do a different topic? Matt, the plan is every Saturday instead of Sunday for this month. So if you're in our Discord server, I put the schedule in there. I'll actually pull it up just to check it. But I'm trying to plan out a whole month just so people can prepare. December 6th, 13th, 20th, and 27th. And then probably the first Saturday in January as well. So I was trying to work around the holidays and holiday plans. So instead of Sundays, we're doing 4 Saturdays this month. Yeah, I like defense because I pulled the Lifetime Access members and said, what kind of course do you want to see next? And defense was actually the top response, which surprised me because I didn't even think about doing a defense course. But there's this book called Chess Exam where you can solve 100 positions and then you rate yourself. And it gives you all these different categories. My biggest weakness was defense. And then for each of the categories, I think there were probably 10 or 12 of them. It would give recommended resources for each level. But the problem with having defense as a weakness is there were not really any recommendations. I think the only recommendation was a book by Colin Crouch, sorry for butchering his name, on defense. I don't know if it was even available on Amazon at the time. Yeah, Colin Crouch, How to Defend in Chess. That was like the only recommendation for defense. So there just weren't a lot of resources even out there for how to improve your defense. So then I thought, well, this would be a good idea for a ChessGoals course. We're looking to do some more non-opening courses, general improvement stuff. Okay, you guys like defense. Good, good. So we'll meet again this same time next week. And I think in 2 weeks we might switch to 2 hours earlier just because I have some family plans for the holidays. So the 20th, we're probably going to do 8 a.m. instead of 10 a.m. U.S. Central Time. But just keep an eye on your emails. Pretty much each Wednesday morning U.S. time, I'll announce when the live classes are coming. So if you don't see an email come through Wednesday, check your spam or promotions folders. You should get something. Or ask in Discord. You can always ask there or email me. All right, I think we will wrap up there. Thanks for watching, everyone. And have a good rest of your day.